as well as the user experiences, things like improved search and discovery, and being able to navigate through much larger catalogs of content. So our panelists we're gonna talk about that. We've got lots of great examples and topics. We'll leave about 10 minutes or so, 10 to 15 minutes at the end for your questions, so please be thinking about what you'd like to ask. And let's start by going down the line and having our panelists introduce themselves, a bit about you, your company, and what you do, how you fit into the ecosystem. Robert.
Thanks, Jonathan. My name is, excuse me, my name is Robert Forsyth. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of WorldNow, based out of New York. Show of hands real quick. Who knows what WorldNow is and what we do, besides Jonathan? First, got one.
Oh, that's impressive.
WorldNow is the largest provider of internet, digital, and video services to the local broadcast industry. Those that live here in the States that are from here, if you go and look at a local news website, 3 out of 4 times that'll be a WorldNow website. We provide not only the front end, but we provide the back end. Everything from CMS to metrics, analytics, OTT, video, the whole gamut. Myself, I'm 25 years local broadcaster, so I understand television business pretty well. Been working for WorldNow for about 5 years. The relevance that WorldNow is kind of seeing and is going is our customers are really starting to want to play in this OTT space, in this OBP space. So they read the headlines, they see the HBO Go, they see the Sling TV, and they see these things. Our clients are a little different because they produce so much content and it's so short-lived. There's a very short shelf life, usually about 48 hours. Just give you a scale real quick on the last note is aggregately, our clients are producing about 500,000 assets each month. So it's okay to say Netflix with their 30 movies this week or Hulu with their 4 or 5 shows. Our clients are producing a ton of assets that they now want to be a significant player in TV everywhere. So that's me.
Thanks, Harry.
All right, I'm with Excedo. We basically do front-end app development, which is really an understatement. I'll get to that in a second. We've been around since 2004. Which is an eternity for this space. And in that time, we've done 300 plus premium video services. So we're focused really on premium video services on OTT across all platforms. We work with customers like Netflix, Showtime, HBO, Fox, FX, WB, operators like Telstra, Sky, and DirecTV, and sports leagues, MLB, NBA, music services, getting them onto the 10-foot, such as Spotify and Pandora. And to date, we've worked with 30 plus platforms, which really speaks to the fragmentation in this space and the challenge that we solve for. So when you talk about front app development, you're talking about integrating a good handful of technologies to comprise a user experience that actually makes sense. So in that way, I look at app development in this space more like front-end systems integration, where you're taking authentication, DRM, OVP backend integration, search, discovery, commerce, social integration, all these different technologies, and then bring them into a UX that the consumer can actually enjoy. So we help solve for the problem of getting content services onto OTT devices.
Hey, before I go to Steve, I just there may be some people in the audience that aren't you're here to learn about technology platforms as opposed to being an expert. So if this is if this is too elementary, I'll try to gauge by the audience reaction. But CMS, Content Management System, OVP, Online Video Platform. We had UX, User Experience. Some of the acronyms that get thrown around a lot, but we take them for granted maybe. But just to, I'll try to.
Please forgive our geekness.
All right, Steve.
This is probably the 27th panel I have heard or been a part of, either at Digital Hollywood or this week, regarding OTT. And there are many, many things that have been repeated. I don't know if everybody's seen it. I think we should try and be a little different than everybody else, because never before has devices leveraged bandwidth, leveraged cloud in the environment. And Jonathan and I were just talking about, even since last year in Digital Hollywood, it's interesting to see what was announced today. You talk about Cablevision and Hulu Plus. Hulu Plus just announced they were buying the whole Jerry Seinfeld library for $700,000 an episode. And it is incredible of even by the hour, let alone by the year, of how many things change. I'm working at Hewlett-Packard, where we have devices and cloud, which they are splitting the company into. But in the sports and entertainment group, it's been very exciting to see how this maturity of the ecosystem of devices and bandwidth and cloud has been leveraged. And one area that has brought a lot of things to the forefront is in education, because companies such as Pearson, McGraw-Hill, Houghton Mifflin, Scholastic, for the last 50 years have sat back very happy making money just printing textbooks. Their software is so antiquated that their businesses are now being threatened. Can they leverage the cloud? How did they do devices? I don't know if there's a lot of people here from Los Angeles where Pearson partnered with Apple to sell 700,000 laptops to the iPads to the LA County Unified School District for $1 billion, and about a month into the project it was canceled because not understanding this whole dynamic of this ecosystem when we have, I'm sure there's content providers, there's infrastructure, so it'll be very interesting to talk about today the dynamics of how does this infrastructure leverage the content for the delivery in the next, what I call the golden age of TV 2.0, because never before have we had a robustness of investing in content and the delivery and distribution capabilities.
All right, Dan.
How do I follow that? So my name is Dan Sweeney. I'm the Western Division Vice President for the Elant Group. The Elant Group is an advanced television software, data products, and analytic-driven marketing and advertising services company. Okay. So,
What don't you do?
well, yeah, right, exactly.
You deliver.
Well, we aggregate and integrate first, second, and third-party data for Fortune 500 companies, the media, insurance, consumer electronics, consumer brand verticals. Some of our customers, Comcast, for example, Spotlight, we work for their ad sales division, Spotlight, and have for many years. Marketing department at Comcast, business services group at Comcast, and again, fueling third-party data and integrating that with their CRM, and helping them grow their business in those areas. We also work for Charter, Cox, and Suddenlink, NBC Networks, Universal Studios, Nationwide Insurance, Avis, CDW, and the list goes on, so I won't go any further than that. Really what we're focused on is the who, what, when, where, and who is watching content on TV, mobile, and online. And we take all these data sources and crunch them all together. We basically take buckets of wet data and pull them all together and make pretty wigs out of it, so that these companies can figure out how to find their audiences, increase their CPMs, and find other insights based on their business models. Okay.
All right. Josette?
Yes, thank you. My name is Josette Bonte. I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Research at the Institute for Communications Technology Management, located at USC. The USC CTM, as we call it, is an institute which is located at the confluence between Hollywood and Silicon Valley. Our sponsors include the Hollywood studios, but also large telecommunications companies like Verizon, AT&T, BT, Orange, etc., as well as technology giants like Cisco, Alcatel-Lucent, and Ericsson.
And now HP.
And HP, yes, I'm very proud to announce HP. What we do is we have these ongoing strategic research programs that we put out for the benefit of our sponsors, and we also have a number of programs, forums, and conferences that we put out throughout the year. And we have a program on the connected home that's based on a panel of 6,000 North American participants. We also have one on mobile life. We have one that tends to gauge how much media is being piped into users' offices. Offices and as well as homes. And last but not least, I started a program devoted to the future of media a year ago, where we're looking at unfolding scenarios for the future of media, very much to the topic of our panel today, not just from the standpoint of film entertainment companies, but also looking at ramifications of the scenarios for our telecommunications company partners, the service providers that produce, actually bring to users video services, as well as for the technology companies that enable the networks. So I'm proud to say that we were looking at 3 main scenarios: the role that Google could play, where the company become more tentacular in deploying high-speed fibers in a number of DMAs. We're looking very closely at changes in bundle offerings by MVPDs, which I've heard a lot at this conference, which I'd be happy to comment more on later as appropriate. And we're also looking at the role of innovation in basically drastically changing the way media is being consumed and, by extension, also brought to market.
Great. Xavier.
Hi, my name is Xavier Kochar. I am part of the Video Genome Project. For those that are not familiar, the Video Genome Project has inarguably the world's largest structured database of video content metadata. I actually have less of a background in infrastructure and enterprise technology, as I think most of my colleagues here on the panel. Started the company because I was a user, not a drug user, a video user. And started the company because I just thought the curation experience, I came to realize that that's the term, curation experience, was just really poor with video content, especially as in comparison to other categories of goods and services. In fact, most other categories of goods and services, over the last decade or so, we've gotten, we've gotten to expect what we're looking for to be delivered to us in a pretty elegant fashion, both with respect to the UX, the user experience, and also the robustness of it. So if you, just think, category by category, whether it's getting an airline ticket or crowd sharing rides, or if any of you live in LA, Waze, these are all curation services. Yet in video, arguably a category that users, people like me, people like all of us, we have a pretty recurring relationship with, oftentimes, most times a daily relationship with, and an emotional relationship with. Just was sort of really curious as to why we were just okay with not being able to find what we're looking for, and probably more importantly, have the right content find us. And so that, about 4 years ago, didn't sought out to start a company or even exploit the commercial opportunity, which has turned out to be pretty big, but it was just driven by intellectual curiosity. That why is it that in this category, in video, we don't have some of the robust, clean, elegant, simple user experiences that we do in other categories, particularly because there's so much video out there, and there's like the video growth curve is pretty much looking close to vertical. And after going out there and talking to a lot of people in the space, discovered that it actually came down to metadata. So even though I've been in sort of the media business on the commercial side and been in Hollywood on the commercial side, I sort of left to 2 years ago to co-found a company that is in the sexy world of metadata. And I got sort of, a lot of people ask me, like, well, what are you doing in metadata? And I have to tell you, over the last 2 years, and I'm sure the panel can corroborate this, it has become sexy because metadata, our understanding of what video is at a granular level, pretty much drives, after you have the infrastructure built, after the pipes and the delivery and all that, the next step to deliver a rich user experience is an understanding of video. So we developed a technology based on a series of algorithms that went out and found metadata in the world. The company was built on the following hypothesis, and thank God it proved right, otherwise there would be no company, which is there is a ton of metadata on video content, all types of video content, all over the digital ecosystem. The thing is, it's radically unstructured. And oftentimes, we don't even know that it's metadata. So there's a lot of information. So what we did is we developed a technology that sourced where this metadata exists and brought it back, separated out the signal from the noise, structured it, cleaned it up, ran data science, and then developed what we call what are called genes. And once you have genes, then you can sort of go to town, which is, in our vernacular, that's a basic building block of video content, which then drives discovery, search, personalization, recommendations, analytics, et cetera.
Cool. That's what it is. All right. And lastly, I'm Jonathan Hurd, a director with Altman Valandri and Company. We're a strategy consulting firm focused on technology, media, telecom. We have 100 people in Boston, New York, and San Francisco. And some of the projects we've been doing lately are helping service providers price triple play bundles, have skinny packages, and figuring out which consumer segments they're targeting and how to deliver that to consumers. So, all right, with that background on who we all are, what we do, thought it would be good to start with, several of the panelists mentioned that the basics of getting video to consumers over the top, the basic infrastructure is there. But there's still plenty of consumer pain points that all of you are addressing with infrastructure. And maybe Josette, to kick it off, this question about what are those pain points now that are still, need to be addressed to improve the over-the-top consumer experience?
Right. Well, I mean, the fundamental one is a question of content availability, actually, way beyond infrastructure issues. I mean, the thing with TV everywhere, for instance, I mean, the main remark that you could have about it is that it is not everywhere, and that's the fundamental flow of it, right? And as far as OTT content is concerned, I mean, the delivery has come a long way, especially with the large companies like Netflix and Hulu. I mean, they have a certain level of quality that, has certainly improved over the past several years. But ultimately, it will become a factor of the broadband connection. I mean, it already is, but as more and more OTTs, become available over the top, then we're going to see an interesting reversal of business, we contend, and this is just our contention, from the businesses of our service provider sponsors, otherwise known as clients in my former world, where the emphasis is really being put on the broadband access, away from video services as a B2C business. And I'm happy to continue that thought as the conversation progresses around that, because that is really the fundamental cord that users are not shaving at all, and that in fact they are continuing to upgrade is the broadband access. Okay, so you could see a divestiture of traditional video services, but you're not divesting your broadband access because it is the key to this new world, as well as some of the reinvented old world.
Are we just piling on with pain points here?
Pile on those pain points. Absolutely.
Navigation, big problem. So the MVPDs, multi-video program distributors, MSOs, whatever you want to call them, cable companies, satellite, are probably still in the best position to pull all the content together in such a way that it makes it easier for a consumer to make choices of what they want to watch. However, there are flaws with that as well because they don't connect to over the top, and vice versa. So if anybody's tried to look at what your options are, you find yourself toggling back and forth from your cable operator interactive guide and having to go on, and you go in to look at Netflix or you go into Hulu. You got to look into each one of those. There are companies that are solving that, trying to solve that right now, but it's still a very difficult and disparate, it's all fragmented still. So I think that's definitely a pain point. It's not going away for a while.
Right.
I have one pain point that's really interesting. It's the number one challenge for all the networks, and that is authentication. Many people don't even know what their credentials are to authenticate. The challenge, though, is you have a triangle of privacy, security, and convenience. So which would you choose if you had to pick one? Most consumers would pick the convenience. How many times do people hear when it says when you log in that whatever app you're logging into, they want to follow you? How many people say that they don't let them to follow them? how many people just say, I want them to follow me? Right? I happen to let them to follow me because I think it's going to enhance the ability to use the app using the GPS. The thing that is the biggest challenge in the world of which we are today, the whole mantra is not a question of if you're going to get hacked, it's only a question of when. So with that, it's a very, very tough balance that the networks are having is, do they lighten up or lessen the authentication to make it more convenient? But then you have the issue of not only privacy, but security.
Yeah, we've got clients that want to do both a paywall and, Adobe Pass or pay authentication in the same, experience, which is, kind of counterproductive. The biggest pain point that I see, the biggest challenge for the industry in general is to kind of resound Xavier's point is metadata, not just metadata, but good metadata. Good metadata leads to discoverability, leads to more time on site, more time on platform. Xavier hit it nail right on the head. There's a ton of it out there, but it's so unstructured and so generic that unless we really devote some energy towards that, your big players are always going to be your big players, but as, from my point of view as local broadcasters start to get into space, and MVPs that are basically online, like a Frederator or a CSI Sports, some of the specialty producers, as they start to enter into this OVP, OTT space, they're going to be competing with the Netflix, the NBCs, the CBSs and stuff, and they're going to do a better job at metadata and discoverability, that the big boys kind of, I don't see, put a lot of effort into that now. And you've got a lot of surfing and, poking around and stuff and people not finding the content.
Well, it's, you're absolutely right, and not only because you said I was right, but there's, first of all, as I'm sure everyone knows, in big companies, there's a tendency to avoid risk as opposed to go, kind of push the envelope, which is why a lot of innovation, not 100% of it, but most innovation that's driven, particularly our digital economy over the last 5, 7, 8 years, has started outside of these big companies. And then eventually, by the way, the big companies will purchase this innovation at a massive premium, which we've seen. But really, for a long time, delivery was, well, first it's content rights, right? So it's like, do we even have content? And there's only so many games in town that you could get the content from, and they were mostly here. And then the lawyers and all that, they worked on content rights. Then the next issue was delivery over the last, 5, 7, 8, 10 years. And I think we all would agree that delivery, that problem, if not 100% solved, it's there. But the MVPDs, for the most part, the cable, satellite guys, that was it. I don't think anyone could have thought 20 years ago that users would have that much, not only choice, but that, like I grew up in an era like the whole NBC, Let's All Be There, or must-see TV. I mean, I don't know if, talk to millennials or Gen Zs, they want content when they want it, how they want it, where they want it, which then speaks to tools. But these cable and satellite operators, they pretty much, their job was just, I'm going to get, like, I've done my job. I've done the rights with the studio, or the cable nets, and I'm giving you the content. What more do you want? And now what I think the next battleground is, and we've heard this from even the likes of Brian Roberts, it's going to come down to you said navigation, or basically matching content to the user, or the user to the content. And much like any industry, it's not a big deal. Curation's not a big deal if there's a limited amount of what your choice is. But remember, I was saying earlier about the video growth curve. There is a ton of video out there. How amazing is it that we live in an era right now? Each one of us has access to about 10 to 100 million pieces of video. That's amazing. Everything from online clips to long form, short form. But how absolutely ridiculous is it that there's not a simple way to get what we're looking for or have that content come to us? And I actually think, guys like me, we're just happy that, hey, they figured out how to get moving sight and sound in my hand. but the generations behind us are going to be, or actually generations ahead of us, they're going to demand getting content when they want, especially because every other industry has trained them for rich curation, every other industry. And I was talking to Jonathan before, 40% of this country curates their life partner through online dating. How crazy is that? Like, how important is that? And that's and yet we're just trying to figure this out. So this, I think will be a huge. I call it curation, but navigation or what have you. I think this is probably going to be the biggest consumer-driven pain point to your question, Jonathan, because of all the other stuff, the infrastructure stuff, that's all going to be fixed. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see, who can get this navigation or curation thing fixed, and I think that'll be a differentiator.
May I add something, Jonathan?
No, sure.
Yeah, okay. So basically, I agree it all started with this, navigation and discovery. I mean, that our research really points to that as well. I mean, very, very strongly. So, but we are trying to go beyond that, and because we're neutral, because I'm not affiliated with a specific company right now, we are also looking at what kinds of opportunities does that provide for players, and new players in particular, to enter the space. So we actually see that a consumer electronics manufacturer, whether it be an Apple or whether it be a Samsung, could actually enter the fray and offer super discovery tools, built into an IP set-top box that would be available at retail for a price below $100, for instance. I mean, we see these scenarios as possibilities for the future of media. And something like that could actually take the industry by storm, because if the players are large enough and start incorporating your tools, I mean, basically all the people on this panel, and start bringing an experience where it's no longer fragmented, where it's all unified by, the strategy of a large player deciding this is what we're going to do, and we're also going to go after content rights in a major way, the way Netflix has, for instance, then that is definitely a game changer.
And there'll be a tipping point, like exactly what happened with search, like not only search marketing, but understanding of, so it wasn't that long ago, like 12 years ago, 14 years ago, World Wide Web came out, and there were no standards. Like, think about like publishers. There was no standards on, like, this is how you publish a page. But because Google developed, based on this algorithmic tool that the company that they bought, Applied Semantics, that read publishers' pages, okay, then the tools became important. So much so now that the tools company is driving content, right? So Google this week, announced, they're changing their black box algorithm to optimize for mobile.
Mobilegeddon.
Right. Literally, publishers, content is now going, well, we got to subscribe to that. So to Josette's point, if we can, I mean, it'll be a tipping point. It'll be like, it'll be hard, and then there'll be a critical mass where then content providers, you just know if you're a content provider or a content aggregator, you have to deliver metadata, or you have to deliver it organized in such a fashion. Once that happens, it'll be such a step change in all of video.
Utopia.
No, it's surreal.
We haven't talked much about the pain points around devices, mobile devices, apps. Perry, what are you seeing there as the chief pain points in using?
I would echo a lot of what the panel's just said. I mean, we're seeing content decoupled from the channel. Consumer freedom of choice becomes a burden and difficult to find what you're looking for. I think that a lot of the people out there are going to start to put together bundles that curate for us. At the same time, I think that there's a missing link, and that is the data, because on the World Wide Web, we have some idea what the consumption behavior is at a granular level for a specific individual, and that's kind of missing on certain platforms. And certain platforms have all that data. So further to the point of a CE manufacturer coming in and providing a next generation experience, they have the possibility to, because they have the consumption behavior of that individual across the entire platform, whereas service provider in and of themselves only know what that consumer is doing within that service. So I think once we bridge the gap with data and all that, then it becomes, freedom of choice doesn't become such a burden. And then as far as the consumer pain points specific to the devices, I think it's all about user experience. I think that we finally got out of the age, I think it started in 2009 or so, where more bells and whistles, people started to build services that felt a lot like the web, because that's all we knew from. And now they're realizing the content has to be the centerpiece, and UX within a device is not so cumbersome anymore. It's simplified, and there are established best practices. A lot of our customers will say, you know, give me a minimal viable product that works well and simple, and then let's build from there. So a lot of the challenges of navigation within a service are being solved, I think. So those pain points are starting to go away, and these services are becoming easier and easier to use. Now I think we're at that point where we have to get to the next step, which is now I have all this choice. You know, how am I going to find what I want? And I'm really excited about some of these virtual MVPDs and the products they're coming out with. The bundles that are more specific to the mainstream channels that people are interested in, not the other 400. You know, those types of things are going to really help.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're seeing with our clients is a verticalization of their own content. So you've got a, you know, I'll just use a television station, you know, process, but main news, and then community service stuff, and then, you know, Crime Stoppers and the other franchise pieces, to where the apps are becoming intelligent enough. Certainly Moore's Law has been very good for mobile devices. One of the things we met with a couple of manufacturers at CES was we've got to get the computing power in televisions better. And once that gets there, then we'll have a much more, his team will be able to build much more interactive, personalized experiences for all of us. And then us as content providers have to kind of make sure with the metadata that we're funneling things into the right channel. So our clients are actually thinking about how do we take this vast library and how quickly and easily can we segment it up to really get to the right eyeball.
That's a great point. I was just with a virtual MVPD that's coming out soon with their product yesterday, and it was rocking on a certain gaming console. And we were talking about a different STB and lower horsepower. And the hallmark of his service, the product that he created was, it's smoking, right? The performance was amazing. And instead of, you know, focusing on how do we, you know, get you know, best possible product to market on other devices, we're talking about where can we compromise so you can actually get something like that onto a lower horsepower device. So sometimes compromises have to be made.
And for these boxes to be affordable, I mean, the cloud has to play a role, to my friend Steve's favorite topic there, because, I mean, clearly, the more bells and whistles deployed in the, you know, set-top box offered at retail, which is, you know, vision that we have, I mean, the more expensive it will be, and therefore the least likely it is going to be to have the take-up rate that would, in fact, facilitate this new phenomenon.
Yeah, but, you know, I won't speak for Steve, but as you're dealing with infrastructure and providers and the technology and stuff, you really have, because, you know, you could have a great system that works great today and you're sending out 20,000 video streams an hour, but tomorrow some catastrophic thing happens, like a switch fails or something, and how quickly the hardware and the infrastructure can respond to that to keep your clients, you know, happy. Infrastructure's there. I agree with Xavier. I mean, we've gotten there, and Josette's point about the last mile for connectivity and bandwidth is coming also. But we can't lose sight upstream of where the technology and where these hard drives and these servers sit to make sure that, you know, we've crossed all the I's and dotted the T's there. So that, you know, there's good disaster recovery for that, because it is going to be an always on 24/7. I call them attention seconds. A viewer is going to give you 7 to 9 seconds to get the content, and if they can't get it, they're going to go someplace else.
Yeah.
So if you can't deliver in that 7 to 9 seconds, then, you know, you've missed it.
All right, let me do some summarizing here and then transition. So around the, starting with rights availability, is the content available on these services? And then there's a combination of discovery, curation, navigation. You know, how do you find that content, whether it's something you absolutely want to watch, or, yeah, I want something that's in this genre or whatever. So there's that part of the user experience. Then there's authentication. So if I do have a pay TV service, being able to watch TV everywhere means I may have to enter my information, password, etc. There's another set of pain points here around, does it work? You mentioned scalability. I think it's still, if there is a big event, we've seen it in the news that these services fail still because there's just too much demand put on to have everyone watching Game of Thrones, et cetera.
Well, if you haven't prepared for that, okay, there's no reason for it to fail. I'll do a little self-bragging here for World Now, but when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, we did 28 million streams in a single day. It's scaled up. We're Akamai's, I don't know if anybody knows Akamai, but pretty much everything you're doing on the internet runs through Akamai. We're their largest client. The Boston Marathon, or Boston bombings, when that hit, we were the only stream that stayed up. In fact, CBS National News actually pointed their website to our client in Boston. You can prepare for those things.
Okay,
And we used to be a lot more tolerant of buffering and, page not found and service not available and stuff like that, but we're finding that less and less today, especially as younger viewers and stuff come up. I mean, 70% of our traffic is now going to these devices. You've got to get it right out the door.
All right. Well, let's actually let me transition. We did this annual consumer video survey, and we asked people, would you rather have a single app from your cable TV provider or a separate app for each of your favorite channels, which is kind of the way the over-the-top world is working today. And 2/3 of even the 18 to 24-year-olds said, I'd rather have a single app from my cable TV provider. And it was more like 90% of 55 plus, in that range. So as we think about overcoming a lot of these pain points we've talked about, and particularly, am I as a consumer going to hop from app to app to app depending on what I want to watch, and even it may not even be there if I go to one of these apps. Talk about the role of the traditional service provider or others that might fill that role of being the single app player. Who is going to be the main, who's best positioned and why?
So it's such an interesting question that you asked the panel, particularly the younger consumers. I almost feel like I don't know, like there's a framing thing with that, right? So, of course, the question, if you allow me to kind of get to the heart of the question, which is, what kind of user experience do you want? Do you want to open up multiple apps, open one up, shut one down, what have you? There's kind of like no doubt in my mind that people would answer that. What, are you crazy? Of course I don't want to do that. What a pain in the butt. But implicit in that is something about content, right? Which kind of gets lost in that calculation. So the service providers are in a phenomenal spot to do this. But right now, the service providers are providing, either because of commercial reasons, which is a big part of it, and because the cable nets often have them, in precarious positions, and also because of technology integration reasons. So they are providing them that one app, but it's that one content bundle. I think if you were to ask that question, what kind of content bundle, I think that content bundle, even amongst the 6 of us, would be unique. We'd want a different content bundle that's personalized to us, given the universe that's out there. If we spent a week, we could actually, like a buffet, create our own plate, but we don't want to do that. We want it done through one buffet service. We don't go to multiple restaurants. So I think from our work with the service providers, especially the ones that see this happening, the ones that are recognizing that how are we losing, we don't even have that many, relatively speaking, MAUs, subscribers anyway. If you think about like an OTT service like Netflix that has 30 million or what have you. So we're losing them to either the cord nevers or the cord cutters. So we have to figure this out as to how we're going to provide personalized content.
Who's the we? Sorry.
The service providers. The service providers have to figure out.
And is that MVPD service providers? Which kinds of service
Well,
providers?
I will say.
Define service provider.
All right, so I'll generally say those that distribute video. So okay, so maybe not a YouTube, because YouTube's a platform, but maybe an MCN.
But
okay?
YouTube is becoming
Correct.
a service provider.
YouTube is becoming a service
Google
provider.
realizes that they're late to the game, and they're
Correct.
going to go after the Netflix, Amazon Prime.
Correct. So if, in other words, when I go to Yahoo's page, Yahoo's homepage, my experience is different than everyone else's in this room. Even though it's all pulling from the same news stories and articles and what have you. That. I don't have to go to multiple publishers.
Right.
I just want multiple unique personalized content to me through one publisher. And whoever can get that.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what what I was saying. And so who is well positioned to do that, and who can do it from a either technology point of view or from a content rights perspective?
Netflix.
Well, the lead position,
Seriously,
lead position
Netflix.
goes to whoever has the most monthly active users, because that's a good starting point, right? So a lot of these tech companies, even ours, we're an enabling technology company. What are we going to do? Like, I guess we could start like an app and like start to compete for users. But so I'd say it's those big MVPDs that have 12 million, 30 million. They're in the pole position. But I don't. It wouldn't surprise me if they still lose, and another like a Netflix comes out of nowhere or whatever that is. But they're in the best position right now, and the ones that are getting it are talking to everyone on this panel. So I think those I would say they're in the best spot. But then Netflix came out of nowhere in 10 years, so there's probably others.
I think to add to that, I think consumer electronic manufacturers, and there's a lot of traction, say, with a Roku or an Apple TV, and they're finding ways for universal search, deep linking within their end-to-end user experience on their platforms, and I think that they're in really good pole position to become virtual MVPDs, and we're already seeing that happen, right? So I think throw them into the mix.
It's not that I disagree, but I think content and content providers are becoming way more fragmented, and they won't be able to keep up. At the end of the day, it's about the business deal.
By content providers, you mean?
The movie studios, the television
Okay.
studios, you people out there, you're going to sell your product to the provider who's going to give you the most money for it. And that fragmentation is exponentially growing. So for one app to be there, or even a couple of apps, it would be nice, but I don't believe that we'll ever get there because there are things on Netflix that I want to watch that I can only watch on Amazon. So I've got to maintain Amazon and Netflix. The whole CBS, Viacom thing, the HBO, the unbundling of ESPN in some cable providers and stuff. There's so much fragmentation in conjunction with a lot of content providers, and I keep bringing up Frederator. If you don't know who they are, just look them up on YouTube. Probably one of YouTube's largest content providers and aggregation services. And you go Google and YouTube themselves. This fragmentation is just going to continue to grow, and it's going to be impossible for one app to serve them all because Netflix is going to go, I'm going to give you $700 million for that, but I want exclusivity for the next 6 months, and you won't see it on Apple TV. Period.
Yeah, but if you
If
follow
I
that curve out, eventually, there will be consolidation, right? Like in every other industry, because maybe there'll be massive fragmentation, but if users don't end up going, like you have these random new distributors that come out and say, hey, and they get VC backed and they have a bunch of money. Like for instance, like what Jason's Vessel, okay? Vessel has a ton of money. This is a former CEO of Hulu, started
Jason
his own,
Keeler.
they have a ton of money, right? So they're going to go, and by the way, studios, I used to work at a studio. I mean, whatever, like whoever's willing to give studios top dollar, here, take it, we'll protect some rights, but here, take it. So eventually, though, what will happen is that, either Vessel will work or it won't, and the work will be the amount of users that keep coming back, subscribing, and the engagement level. If it doesn't work, they'll go away. If it does work, you're going to start seeing the Hulu Plus, the Hulu Cablevision type deals, and eventually it'll all kind of roll back up to 2, 3, 4, 5 players. But you're right. I mean, there's going to be a period of time where the studios, by the way, are loving it on the short term because now people are paying for like garbage long tail catalog that no one wanted. Okay, but I was speaking earlier in a meeting today, and I kind of think that may be slightly short-sighted for by the studios, and we were saying that if you, like Netflix, the studios created that monster, right? And now the studios are eventually, Netflix is gonna have buying power over
They already
content,
do.
right? But tell me, does this not happen in Hollywood? I mean, is not deja vu? Do you guys remember Blockbuster? This has happened over and over again because studios are driven by, content providers are usually driven by, short-term profits. So-
Advances and guarantees.
Well, I'm
And
sure,
distribution.
and I'm sure
If I
Netflix
may.
was in there bidding for Seinfeld just as much as Hulu was, but Hulu gave them more money.
Right. So we have actually crunched numbers around this whole situation, right? We've done deep economic analyses as to what is going to happen in this future of what I've heard referred to as skinny bundles on these digital Hollywood panels. So first of all, my money is not on long tail. I think long tail is dead. Okay, so I'm going to take a contrarian view to you because that's what our panels indicate. Okay, and our panels have a lot of millennials and a lot of plurals in them, and the plural generation is a generation that's under 17 right now. So if any of you have those kinds of teenagers at home, you see what they watch, and it's not always long tail. It's YouTube content, but it's not what we Hollywood have termed long tail traditionally. So where do we think this is going to rest? Well, we think that basically the MVPDs have a great deal of wind in their sails, and that they are actually, very strong companies, very smart companies, not the most nimble. And you're right, they're going to wait until companies like yours mature to try and acquire them. Okay, so there is definitely a missed opportunity there. But I mean, for the short term, but for the long term, it's all your gain. But anyway, so we definitely see a world of smaller bundles because as Nielsen indicates, the average user does not see more than 16 different networks on a lineup that has become an average of 180, I believe, is the current benchmark. So basically, there's something broken with that model. So we see a segmentation of smaller bundles around demographics, a millennial bundle, for instance, a women's bundle, a kids bundle, which would be tremendously popular. For instance, we've run numbers on what would happen if an MVPD, and we've actually segmented it by MVPDs, but I cannot give you that granularity. What would happen if they were to launch a kids bundle, for instance? What would be a price at which there would be decent adoption and no attrition from current, there would be some attrition. There would be some divestiture of current programming in favor of just buying that kids bundle, but not so much that over a period of 5 years it would not basically average out to profit. And a $10 price point we arrived at for economic analysis would be very good. Another thing that we've seen as a possibility are companies themselves building their own bundles. Disney building its own bundle and approaching the Comcast and the Time Warners and offering a Disney bundle. And we run some simulations around that as well. And there, our calculations are more optimistic that our calculations would actually support a $30 introductory bundle, for instance. And then we found that perhaps a Viacom bundle would be possible, and there our numbers actually were a little bit less high. What we did not see, interestingly enough, as a viable bundle, and after that I will let my fellow panelists talk. But what we did not see, interestingly enough, as a viable bundle was a sports bundle, because the price of sports is just so overblown that basically we toyed with all kinds of
You're saying a sports-only bundle?
Sports-only bundle,
right.
yeah. And we just couldn't make the math work
Interesting.
in terms of, the price point that would, again, not cause tremendous attrition from a current basic package, for instance, in favor of that, and cause adoption or cause mitigation of cord shaving.
Okay,
So
so
what was that sports bundle
We hit
projection?
$45,
$45?
and we couldn't make it work.
So let's take a step back, or not a step back, a summary here. It seems like we all pretty much, I think, agree that the MVPDs are pretty well positioned to be the player that has a chance of bringing all this content together in a way that allows consumers to navigate all these options.
I'm going to.
Counterpoint there?
No, I'm not going to counterpoint. I'm going
Okay.
to add to that,
Yep.
that your summation there with the MVPDs, who can track consumer behavior through set-top box, so they know real-time clicks, where the networks drives them crazy because they can't see it. They got to rely on Nielsen, and everybody's beating Nielsen on the head for saying that their sample data is not good and, you know, antiquated measurement and all that. So, but they also have access to broadband data. So you combine those two things, and you can tie that to a household, so they know how many pets I have, how many kids, you know, what I make, and all that stuff. That's pretty powerful stuff. And
They have
nobody
the
else-
wire there already.
Huh?
They already have the wire there. They're already.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
Let me, just to make
So
the discussion.
anyway, so
just to make the
I just wanted to throw
discussion-
that on yours.
Yeah, those are great points. But to make it interesting, this is not necessarily what I believe, but a devil's advocate position, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
As we have viewers shifting to mobile devices, more and more viewers spending more and more time watching on tablets and smartphones, as opposed to in-the-home set-top box-based viewing.
That's true.
And as many of those MVPDs, the ones that have the broadband connection at least, have limited footprint in the US. They're operating in a region, so they don't have the scale to be able to source the content that a player like a Netflix would. You know, how does that play into this? And does it, you know, particularly for apps and the device manufacturer, the OS provider, do they get more power here as they, you know, with more global footprint, the ability to possibly control the apps? Like, only Apple could decide that they're going to create a launcher to launch apps. If I find something, maybe it automatically launches the Netflix apps. A cable operator can't do that. In fact, probably only Apple could, right? So, you know, what do you see happening in the future as we shift?
Or does Verizon, are they in a better position because they have wireless and they have set-top
MVP,
box
yeah.
and
Well,
they
you
have...
say that for anybody.
broadband?
Dish, Direct, Verizon, Comcast, they all have that. Flew out here, there was a gentleman sitting next to me watching Xfinity TV on his tablet.
Yeah.
And he had sent some VOD stuff from his cable box to his tablet before he left, I guess, and was sitting there watching HD video on the plane.
Right.
I think it's a great point. I think we would all agree that it's much easier to navigate content from mobile. And if we're looking at cord cutters and cord nevers and this upcoming generation that's coming of age, and you look at a TV, I see the TV as the perfect piece of display glass, right? And then the mobile device, a way to cast it onto there is like a perfect situation, especially for the plurals and the millennials. So it's a great point, how you kind of get around the set-top box, and I think the future generation will be doing that. In fact, they won't even have one in the house.
We've got it, again, our survey, 40% of those under 35 are weekly watching TV shows and movies on their smartphones and tablets. And so, you know, that generation is, and it's not necessarily out of home. It might be in another room or just where it's more convenient. But that set-top box and traditional TV are just not as used as much by that
Well,
generation.
Perry's point about screencasting and stuff is very valid, but I also see that there'll be a shift in the next couple of years as the CPU cycles and the technology gets better on the televisions. I've recently bought a 70-inch Vizio, and I got rid of my Roku. I got rid of my Kindle Fire because those apps are native on the television and they're good. So now my sons, I've got a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old. My 10-year-old watches a ton of YouTube sports videos, but he's watching it on a 70-inch television because there's still that desire for that lean-back television experience. And watching like this is fine, but I think you'll see as more horsepower gets into the television sets, you'll see that shift back into the living room or the family room because the apps will get better on the televisions.
I want to add to that. I always said the shortest path always wins. So I thought that connected TV was the future, actually. This was a couple of years ago. And then when I look at the replacement cycle of a TV and the relatively low cost of a set-top box, I kind of changed my mind. I think it's one of the few places where the shortest path doesn't necessarily win. So the experience on your Vizio, you know, it could be easily replaced plugging in a stick for $30. And so, and then also this is always in my hand, and if I can just flip it onto the TV, that's what the TV's best at. So
Yeah.
you make some good points, but I think it might be a short-lived experience where this is always the fallback, I think. Not watching long-form content on this, but using this as a tool for finding content and then flipping it onto the screen when I want to lean back.
Yeah, okay, I'll go with that.
Jonathan, I mean, what a great point to bring up the fragmentation of the infrastructure provider, right? Which sometimes we forget because we think Comcast and Time Warner and even the satellite guys, they have this ultimate power. But I mean, I can tell you as a data guy, scale matters in an understanding of your users. And depending on their footprint, and in some DMAs, they have no scale at all. In some DMAs, it's a carrier game. In some, whatever it may be. But you said like the OEMs or the device guys. I mean, with maybe the exception of Apple, I mean, as slow as the MVPDs work, well, forget about it. I mean, like if anyone's ever, respectfully, done business with any of the OEMs, I mean, it takes you like a year or two just to get all the customs right before they'll even let you, do anything. So I don't have high hopes that what you're talking about will be led by the device guys necessarily. And Perry, to your point, what's used to think it's the television, but replacement cycles and set-top box, and those replacement cycles are even less. But it's still kind of, there's still some friction in if not a lot of friction in replacing the set-top box. You know what's like almost zero friction? What I'll call like virtual MVPDs or like the OTT thing. Like literally I can be somewhere, download something, and that can be my new over-the-top experience. So, like I said, pole position goes to the MVPDs, but they don't do this the right way. There's going to be a Netflix or I mean Amazon. We haven't even talked about how Amazon. I think everyone should be scared of Amazon. Like everybody.
Well, maybe we can create a new acronym. We'll call it DOT, disconnected over the top.
Right.
Because you're right, because you'll be able to throw these to these.
And I sort of feel like with respect to Amazon, they're sort of they're kind of like that, they're kind of like the sixth grader in elementary school, and all the second and third graders are getting into a fight, and they're just eating their sandwich, and at any one time they know they can just come in. I mean, look at whether it's the drones and the delivery, So I mean, I do think the OTT guys, but then in a way we also haven't talked about regulation.
I know. But you know what?
Yeah.
We've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to give the audience. Maybe someone has a question about regulation. Yes, in front of me.
Yeah, it's been predicted that there'll be 7 million 4K TV sets sold just in America.
Yes.
Now, I just wanted to panel's thoughts on future 4K content. Going to be demand, and will there be a delivery system?
I think 4K will have a greater proliferation on mobile devices, and virtually none on desktop. It'll get there, but I don't see a lot of people. It's kind of reminds me of when 3D came out about 10 years ago. Remember the Masters? They had 4 cameras that were 3D enabled for the Masters tournament. Nobody put on their glasses. I've seen this, in just my personal opinion, the same thing with 4K I see with 3D. They'll be there, but there won't be any content, and without the content, nobody's going to invest in the money.
I wouldn't use necessarily the 3D analogy because that failed, and you don't see 3D anymore. What the analogy the broadcasters have used for me is more when SD went to HD, and you had to have the HD television production in order to have the HD quality. Similarly, you're now seeing broadcasters invest in the 4K production cameras to correlate with the 4K television. So that it's more synonymous or analogous to the SD to HD. That's what you're seeing to the 4K and then eventually the 8K.
How about black and white to color? It took a while. It really did take a while.
But, there's also got to be, Steve makes a good point about, it's sports especially is driving that.
Yeah.
But until the TV stations build the infrastructure to pass that on, it's not going to go anywhere. We went HD to SD, and I personally, transformed the ABC affiliate in Washington, D.C. from SD to HD. We didn't do anything magic behind the scenes. We didn't put anything, new equipment in. We just basically up-converted before it went out the door. Boom, we're HD. Passed ABC through, boom, HD. It wasn't until, gosh, 11 years later before we bought our first piece of HD studio gear, only because we had to replace the studio. So Steve makes a very valid point that there are providers in there, but until the infrastructure at the local television station gets there, it's just not going to be passed through. And even at the networks, at the big three or big four, it's just not going to be passed
I
through.
mean, and those players are probably the ones that are going to lag in
Yeah.
4K relative to over-the-top.
There's no business model for
providers.
ABC to invest in 4K.
Right. So there is, already you can get 4K content from Amazon. I think wasn't the latest House of Cards in 8K or filmed in 8K or
Yep.
produced in 8K? So, you know, that's an example of an area where over-the-top is probably going to lead traditional. It already is.
Yeah, it just, the OTT and that whole thing's just going to blow away the local broadcaster. It really is, unfortunately, but it's going to happen.
Slightly reminds me of the music and how we also went to Napster because we could just go to Napster and find the band and the record and we didn't have to know which label it was and all of that. But if I'm looking for a segment of the White House Correspondents' Dinner the other night, Luther doing the anger management of the president, I just went to Google and wrote down Correspondence Dinner Luther. Boom, out it comes. I can watch C-SPAN, I can watch ABC News, I can watch CNN. So my concern is that if we really look at it from a consumer's point of view, I mean, if I want House of Cards, I might not know it's on Netflix, but if I write down House of Cards in a Google search, it will take me not just to Netflix, but to everywhere else. It's slightly in my ballpark to know whether or not Netflix has exclusive rights. But there are dozens of places like Game of Thrones, and we now further ahead on Game of Thrones through a Google search than you are by going to HBO Go. So the question is, how do you deal with this? Because obviously you spend a lot of money buying the rights and paying for production, but basically the consumer just goes to Google, writes down the title, or
I mean, if you're using Chrome, which is, you know, becoming the #1 browser, you don't even have to go to Google anymore. Just type it in the address bar. It'll go there. You know, you don't even have to go to Google.
where are we going? What's going to happen in the next few years?
Well, so
Yeah.
That's perfect for you.
Yeah, there you go, Xavier.
Well-
He teed that one up.
Well, okay, so a couple of things. One, so let's say you, because all of the, if you want to watch clips, first of all, there's three responses here. First is when you said, I want to find this clip of Luther at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, okay? First of all, you know exactly what you want, okay? Right. That's a lean forward, that is a search experience, okay? This is why advertisers love search, because people are raising their hand saying, I want this, okay? How often do you, is video a lean forward, I want this, versus I have 30 minutes of disposable time, or I just finished dinner, I'm in this mood, or my kids are with me. Every now and then, it's, I know exactly, right? Somehow someone told you that you got to watch this Luther clip, okay? But what if you didn't know what you're looking for? That's number one. What we're talking about here is our systems, our distributors, our MVPDs, our service providers. The system should be smart enough to recognize who you are, what time of day it is, who's in your family, what mood you're in, all of the types of things that actually exist in other categories, and say, this massive library of content, we got what you're looking for. That's the first thing. The second thing is, let's...
That'd be called curated.
It'd be
that?
called suggestion.
It'd be called
Right.
Suggestion.
Yeah.
Navigated.
The second thing is, I get it. Like web search, frigging amazing. Okay. Video search, not so amazing. And just do it. Literally, do an
Yeah,
apples to apples.
that's right.
Go to Google web search for something that's kind of word related or publisher related, and then go to YouTube which, by the way, is a Google company. It's the second largest search engine in the world, YouTube is. And see if you get the same type of robust results. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek because sneak preview, you won't, okay? In this case, a lot of people were talking about that clip, but in other cases, it happens to me all the time. I'm thinking of like I love old music, and I'm like, oh, that video of that thing, and I'm relying on some 18-year-old or 24-year-old that has happened to uploaded that clip and titled it exactly the way that I needed to be titled, okay? So that's the second thing.
And there is a lot of, I'm sorry, one second, there is a lot of fraudulent use of that technology.
Yeah, and then the third thing, and this is probably, those other ones, the first two are also right, but this is probably the biggest thing. So you go to Google web search, and I'm looking for a clip, or I'm looking for a piece of video. What's the next thing you have to do? You have to then watch the video on some other platform or some other, in this case, that relies on that clip. Clips, fine. That's the long tail stuff that Josette was talking about, But if I want to, by the way, I know a lot of people that do this. A lot of the millennials in my company, I ask them, I say, when you have Netflix or you have Amazon, like, how do you find stuff? Oh, we go to Google. And then what do? Well, then we know the name of it, and then we put it in the other thing.
Right.
Is that not a disjointed experience? That's a radically disjointed. Imagine going to a restaurant and saying, wait, hold on, let me consult this other place to decide what I want. And then going, I know what I want now, can you bring this? That's the experience. So, it's just sort of, I think we can all agree, is there any doubt that this is going to be together? It's just about when and how.
I think it'll get better because the FCC requirements 2 years ago to make broadcasters, both national and local, closed caption everything. So now you've got companies like Ramp and stuff that are not only ingesting the video and the metadata, but are ingesting all of the closed captioning and syncing that up, timestamping it into the video. So you could take and look for your Luther video and get an hour-and-a-half long correspondence center segment, but it'll narrow you down within plus or minus 30 seconds of that point in the clip. So the FCC requirement, for the first time FCC actually did something good by making it mandatory for broadcasters to put closed captioning in. And you're seeing search providers and stuff start to accumulate and curate that data separately.
We are out of time, but thank you all, and please join me in thanking our panelists.